Hello and welcome to Vanished Memories, a channel dedicated to getting out lesser-known true crime and missing persons cases. My name is Brianna, and today I will be presenting to you the missing persons case of Lutricia Steele, a mother who went missing in 2008 from Schenectady, New York. If you are interested in this type of content, please do subscribe as I put out videos every Wednesday. Before I fully delve into this case, as always, I do want to give my trigger warnings or content warnings. In this case today, we will be briefly talking about the topic of rape or sexual assault, as well as the fact that it's known that Lutricia possibly was pregnant at the time that she went missing. Viewer discretion is, as always, advised. Without further ado, let's get into the case of Lutricia Steele, a 27-year-old mother of four who went missing from Schenectady, New York on May 1st of 2008. Lutricia was born on January 25th of 1981. When I researched this case, unfortunately, there's not that much known about her background or her childhood, but what I could garner is she did go through some hardships. It was said that Lutricia was actually raised in foster care as a child, but I was not able to find out exactly the circumstances surrounding the decision for her to be put in foster care. Additionally, Lutricia was known to have worked at a strip club at one point, though I'm not exactly sure if she still was at the time of this case taking place, and it was known that on occasion she did sell marijuana. We do know that at the time of this case, Lutricia had 4 children and, according to some sources, was also possibly pregnant with her 5th child. We will get into that pregnancy in a little bit. Also note that some sources in this case for some reason allege that she only had 2 children, which is a little bit weird, but I believe that there's a reason for that, which I will get into in a short while as well. At the time of this case, Lutricia had a 6-month-old girl named Alicia and a 2-year-old boy named Kason. She did have 2 older children, though I was not able to find their names out. And at the time of this case, those 2 children were with Lutricia's estranged husband. That's why I believe some sources might think that she only has 2 children, since the other 2 that she had were with someone else at the point of this case. Her older 2 children were fathered by her estranged husband, though it seems as though the younger 2, Kason and Alicia, could have been fathered by one man or fathered by 2 separate men. So at the time of this case, Lutricia and her estranged husband were just that, estranged but not divorced yet, but they did have shared custody of their 2 children. Either way, I do just want to point out that Lutricia has 4 children and not 2, like some sources point out. Before we fully get into the day that Lutricia went missing, let me give you some general information about her. At the time of her disappearance, she was 27 years old, was about 5'2" to 5'4", and weighed approximately 100 pounds. She was also white, had blue eyes, and naturally brown hair, which at the time of her disappearance was dyed blonde. Lutricia also liked to go by the nicknames Trish or Titi, and she also sometimes used the last names Zasa or Zasa Steele, Zasa being her mother's last name. Lutricia also had several tattoos. I'm not sure if I can find images, but if I can, I will put them on screen now. But regardless, I'm going to read them off to you so I get all the information correct. She had a tiger on her ankle, a ribbon with the name Sean on her left arm, the name Kason on her chest, a flower with writing on her lower back, and a leopard on her leg. She also had her nose, tongue, and ears pierced. At the time of this case, Ethel lived with her 2 younger children, Alicia and Kason, as well as her mother, Ethel Zasa. They lived in the 1100 block of Webster Street in Schenectady, New York. I do want to clarify that I'm not 100% sure if Ethel was her biological mother or her foster mother. I would lean biological mother, but the interesting thing that I found was it seems as though Ethel unfortunately did pass away in 2018, and Lutricia is not listed as one of her children, so I'm not exactly sure, like I said, if it is her foster mother or her biological parent. At around 2 p.m. on the day of May 1st, 2008, which is the day that unfortunately Lutricia would go missing, she would leave the house telling her mother that she would be back in approximately 2 hours. She said that she would be back around 4 p.m. to pick up the kids for a barbecue, and at this point was leaving to run a few personal errands. She would be leaving to allegedly cash a check and go to a doctor's appointment. According to her mother in an article that I read, her mother could not recall what she was wearing due to the fact that she had actually gone out with friends that day and had changed her clothes while out with them. But according to NamUs, it was said that she was wearing a black sweatshirt, blue jeans, and black sneakers. I'm not 100% sure if the clothing that Namus mentions is accurate, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. Regardless, according to her mother, when Lutricia left that day, she seemed in good spirits and was acting completely normal. Like I said, she told her mother that she was leaving that day in order to run a few errands, which would be to cash a check and go to a doctor's appointment. Now, according to a friend of Lutricia's after this case took place, she said that Lutricia had actually confided in her that she was pregnant again, and this appointment was in fact to check on the pregnancy and see how far along the pregnancy was. I was unable to find exactly how far along this pregnancy was, considering that unfortunately Lutricia had gone missing shortly after this appointment, and it seems as though she never told her mother Ethel about this pregnancy, just that one friend. If Lutricia was in fact pregnant at the time, which it seems as though she could have, we're not 100% sure on who the father of that child could be, whether it's one of her other children's fathers or a different man entirely. At this time in Lutricia's life, it was known that she did not have a car, so it seems as though she may have walked or used public transportation to get herself to and from these errands. There is no indication that she got a ride from someone or attempted to. Unfortunately, after Lutricia went to these appointments and ran these errands, she would never be seen again. She did not return to the family home at 4 o'clock to pick up her kids for that barbecue like she said she would. In the aftermath of this case, her mother Ethel would say that her daughter had never stayed away before, and this was very unlike her. There's not much known about the search after Lutricia's disappearance. I do know that the primary investigating agency is the Schenectady Police Department, as well as the New York State Police, but otherwise I'm not sure what was done to help find Lutricia. I was able to find one source that explained the search for Lutricia, but keep in mind that this is actually from a Reddit post, so I'm not 100% sure if this is accurate. On part of this Reddit post, the author claims that Lutricia's family had tried to report her missing very soon after realizing that she was, but according to this Reddit post, the police actually didn't take an official report until May 13th, which is almost 2 weeks later. Of course, this information is very concerning, but take it with a grain of salt because, like I said, I found no other indication of that other than on this Reddit post. The Reddit poster then goes on to say, regarding the investigation, police handed out flyers in places she may have been that day, and her family did the same as well as speaking to people on the street and conducting searches. The Schenectady Police Department did not post her missing status on their website for 1 month. Again, I do not know if this is at all accurate, but I do want to point out one thing about that last sentence that I read to you. So, like the person said, the police department allegedly did not put up her missing persons information on their website until a full month after she went missing. And I'm not sure if that means a full month after she actually went missing on May 1st, or a full month after the police report was filed on May 13th. But I do just want to mention that this, of course, does sound quite upsetting if it is true that a police department would not put up Lutricia's missing persons information on their site. However, this is quite common. In my time in college, I spent a fair portion of time researching how different agencies and police departments enter their information regarding missing persons specifically into various databases. And what I found was that a lot of police departments, namely a lot of small police departments, tend to mass file a lot of their missing persons information onto databases. So that means that a lot of the time they don't immediately input all that information onto a database as soon as it's given to them. They often will wait for a lot of cases to come in before they add that information. So I did just want to mention that there in case that was in fact what happened, since it does seem kind of concerning, but it seems that that is common practice. Besides the alleged search that happened, according to the Reddit post, what I was able to find, and it seems to be very accurate considering it's on the Charlie Project as well as the Namus website, that during the subsequent investigation, it was found that Lutricia did have a prepaid cell phone, but it seems as though it also disappeared with her, meaning that she likely had it on her at the time that she went missing. The police would try to call Lutricia's number on that prepaid cell phone, but unfortunately no one would ever pick up, and it seems as though no calls were made from it before the line was disconnected. Additionally, it was said that at the time, Lutricia was actually receiving disability checks for a back injury that she got, and those were never cashed in. I'm assuming that those probably were being sent to her address with her mother, and of course she never returned home for those. Now that I've talked specifically about her case, what happened, and the aftermath, I want to talk to you about some theories. Now, I will be presenting some more details of her case, but I thought it made more sense to add this in the theories section, since a lot of the stuff I'm going to tell you actually happened before she went missing. So in this case, we will talk about two different theories. And the first theory is that Lutricia had chose to leave and did so voluntarily. Now, this theory doesn't seem to be as widely accepted as the second one that I'll talk about, but I thought that it was worth mentioning regardless. The reason that some people believe in this theory is due to the fact that after Lutricia went missing and the investigation was launched, it was found out that Lutricia had actually asked her sister in April of that year, so only 2 weeks before she went missing, if she would be able to watch her 4 kids for her for about a month. In response, her sister had declined to do this unless Lutricia gave over temporary custody for her 4 kids, and Lutricia would decline this. Her brother would then offer to take the kids from her for a month, but Lutricia also declined that. It definitely is interesting that Lutricia would ask someone to take care of her 4 kids, especially all 4 of them, when you consider the fact that Lutricia's estranged husband had shared custody of the 2 older kids with her. So, of course, he would have been able to watch over those 2 kids for her. However, I'm not 100% sure on how the custody agreement for them was worked out, whether it was more 50-50 or if Lutricia or the husband had more custody of the kids. But regardless, the fact that she did ask someone to take care of her kids for a month and then went missing in the middle of that projected timeline does kind of lead some people to believe that she left voluntarily. However, it's believed that if she did have intentions of leaving, it would have been only for a short time, as, like she said, she wanted the kids to be with her sister for only about a month. I was able to look a little bit more into custody laws in New York, and what I found was that there is something called standby guardianship, which means that someone can appoint someone else to be a guardian if they believe that they might need assistance in the future. A lot of the time, that means that they might have a long-term illness, or might have to leave the country for some reason, or could possibly be fearful of deportation. However, this doesn't seem to be the case for Lutricia. Even though most of the time standby guardianship is filed for documented reasons, like needing to leave the country for something like work, it seems as though Lutricia would have been able to file for standby guardianship even if she just knew that she had intentions of leaving for a short period of time, which could have been the case. And of course, maybe she did feel unsafe for some reason, and that was the reason why she wanted her kids with her sister. However, as we know, she would decline the option for her sister to get temporary custody of her kids, so it seems as though whatever was going on, she probably didn't deem serious enough for her to have to sign over guardianship to her sister. Regardless, that's kind of a long way to say maybe she felt unsafe, or maybe something was going on in her life, but she definitely didn't think that it was going to go on long enough for her to have to give over guardianship of her kids. Like I said, she intended for her sister to take care of her kids for a month, but now she's been gone for over a decade, almost 2 at this point. Also, the theory that Lutricia left on her own volition doesn't fully hold up given the fact that Lutricia had intentions of going back to pick up her 2 younger kids that day. If you remember, she did tell her mother that she was going to be back in 2 hours at approximately 4 p.m. in order to pick up Alicia and Kaysen for a barbecue. Additionally, like I said earlier, this behavior is very uncharacteristic for Lutricia. She was never known to try to leave her family or stay away from them for any extended period of time. Because of this, like I said, the idea of her purposely leaving of her own volition is not widely accepted. But the next theory that I'll talk about does seem more plausible if we think about it. This theory, unfortunately, is that there was some type of harm done to Lutricia by somebody. Given the fact that Lutricia's been gone for almost 2 decades now, we do need to face the plausible idea that she could be deceased at this point. This theory, like I said, is more plausible than the last one due to a few different reasons. Like I said several times before, Lutricia had absolutely no history of trying to leave her family. However, it is very odd to think that she would ask her sister for a month to take care of her kids unless she was genuinely fearful of something or felt like she needed time away. The theory that someone hurt her is very largely supported by the next fact that I'm about to share with you. At the time that Lutricia disappeared, it was actually known that she was due to testify in court. And that was a court case against her youngest child's father, who she would accuse of raping her. This case was due to start that May, shortly after Lutricia had disappeared. The fact that this case was going to happen very soon after she went missing is, of course, certainly suspicious. However, it is known that the person that she accused of raping her was in jail at the time, and I wasn't able to determine if the case ever continued even though she had gone missing. Even though the person who she accused of raping her could not have hurt her from inside the jail, I was able to determine that if she had gone missing, it is possible that the rape case could have been dropped. This all depends on the other types of evidence in this case. So in rape cases that are being prosecuted, it's said that there's no law that specifically mandates a victim to testify, though oftentimes it does help the prosecution's case. A rape case could definitely be dropped if the victim cannot or will not testify. However, it's up to the prosecution to determine if they feel like they have enough evidence otherwise. If they do in fact have enough evidence, they would be able to continue this trial without the victim's testimony. However, like I said, I was not able to find the name of the person that she accused or any information on if the trial did continue without her. Again, the person that she accused was in jail at the time, and of course, he would not be able to get to her. But that unfortunately does not mean that he could not have had connections outside to hurt her. Again, this is just a theory, but it is possible that if the man that she accused of rape was very fearful of getting the rape charge and being sent to prison for a period of time, maybe he felt like the only way to stop that was to hurt or in some way silence Lutricia. The idea that some harm was done to Lutricia due to the rape accusation is one part of this theory, but there is another side that I think is worth talking about. As we know, Lutricia was allegedly pregnant at the time that she went missing, and according to sources, no one knows who the father is. Additionally, we do not know if Lutricia or the father was happy with this pregnancy. Like I mentioned before, Lutricia had only told her friend about this pregnancy and not her mother. However, I wasn't able to determine if maybe this was common for her. A lot of times women will not tell a lot of people in the first trimester of their pregnancy, considering the fact that it's quite a danger zone and there's a very high risk for miscarriage. So it doesn't mean that she was fully unhappy with the pregnancy or didn't want to tell people, but it could have just been that she wanted to wait. However, it could be possible that the father was not happy with the pregnancy. Again, this theory is just speculation, but some people believe that if the father wanted Lutricia to get an abortion and maybe she didn't want to, he could have possibly done harm to her because of that. Unfortunately, there are definitely cases of that happening before, so it's not entirely impossible in this case. And remember that this is a theory and just a theory. There really isn't much evidence to support this, but I thought that it could be worth mentioning given the fact that it could be a factor in her disappearance. With all that being said, unfortunately, Lutricia is still missing to this day. I do just want to mention the fact that her mother Ethel was given custody of her 2 younger children, and her husband was given custody of the 2 older children in the aftermath of this case. Unfortunately though, as I mentioned earlier, it does seem as though Ethel has passed away in 2018 according to an obituary that I found, so I'm not exactly sure where the 2 younger children are now as they're not of age to be by themselves, but I do hope that they're with family or at least somewhere safe. I do also want to mention the fact that there has been some outreach for her case and any evidence regarding her case in 2018 and 2023. There were articles published in that year that mentioned that the Schenectady Police Department as well as the New York State Police were publicly appealing to get any more information that they could about the disappearance of Lutricia Steele. Unfortunately, it does seem as though no more information has been garnered from these appeals. However, if you or anyone you know have any information regarding this case, please reach out to the proper authorities. I will have their information on screen as well as in the description box as always. This concludes the case of 27-year-old mother of 4 Lutricia Steele, who went missing from Schenectady, New York in 2008. Unfortunately, even though her case is almost 2 decades old, she has never been seen or heard from again. Thank you once again for tuning in to Lutricia Steele's case. If you found this case educational or interesting to listen to, please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, comment, or share this video. Again, my name is Brianna, and thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Vanished Memories. Bye!